this as, I'm perceiving this red square as quote-unquote green. The other person is perceiving this red square as quote-unquote red. But we recognize that one and the same thing can't both be, and I'll use red, right? This is a contradiction, right? It can't both be red and not red at the same time. In the same space occupying blah, 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 right? One and the same object occupying the same space-time can't both be red and not red. Right? That would be a contradiction. You can't both be 6 feet and not 6 feet tall, occupying the same space-time. You can't do that, right? You can't both be red and not red. But the point is, actually, yes, you can. Because the redness doesn't inhere within the object itself, right? That's important, right? Redness does not inhere within the object. Right? Redness does not inhere within the object. The fact that it is red is not mind-independent property of the external reality. This is important. The primary quality is mind-independent. The primary quality exists independent to my perception of it. Right? Independent to the perception of my recognition that I have objects on my desk. If I leave this office, these objects still exist. If I come back, it's not because I started to think that they came into existence. No, they exist independent to my perception of them. The redness, however, does not exist independent to my perception of it. Right? The redness of the object is contingent on how my body contextualizes the given sense data. I have the type of body that when presented with wavelengths of this particular blah blah blah, it processes that information of red in terms of green. So we recognize then the power of, and I use, and this is why I love doing what I do, because I don't have to stay within the canon, right? But I recognize the role then of my body, because I don't want to use the term mind as body, let's use it like that. Descartes wouldn't agree with me, but this isn't a lecture about Descartes. I recognize the contextual role of my body as processing unit, integrating information from the world, and thus the redness of the objective fact is contingent on how my mind, on how my mind processes that information. Right? I have the type of mind that processes that information, which is unchanging. We do, and that's important, right? There is a similarity. There's an identical. That's absolute. This is it. This is, if I can't do it any clearer than this. This has to be as clear as it gets. The given, this is identical, right? We could really sort of stipulate, and I don't know how to stipulate it because I didn't prep that much for the lecture series. But the idea is I could give you the scientific sort of way in which, just like I did with the primary quality, I can give you the scientific way in which red is emitted. Red is emitted as such. We define red in scientific terms as blah, 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 blah. That is unchanging. It's exactly the same for this perceiver as it is for me. However, my interpretation of that sense data is different from the way in which this person perceives the sense data. So, if we were constructing an analysis, we would recognize specifically, because there's constant here, right? This is constant. The projection, the given, is constant. Red is defined as ... Red is defined as ... That information is given to the perceivers. We then should have an agreement because the same information was given. However, we recognize that we don't have an agreement. I perceive this as green, you perceive this as red. We have two different perceptions based on the same given externalized sense data, right? The sense data is given to us, and we should, for all practical purposes, see exactly the same thing, yet we don't. Therefore, the ambiguity, the distinction, cannot rest within the object itself, because it came as such. Red is defined as such. It rests within the body, within the mind as body. The body then is the source for the way in which we contextualize our understanding of the world. Is it to say then that there isn't meaning in someone who contextualizes green as red? Of course there's meaning, right? It's precisely because people contextualize green as red and see green as red that we have ascribed the name color blindness, right? We recognize that there are different ways in which people observe the world. This is something that's important because this now becomes really, conceptually speaking, a really good foundation for discussing the theme of this segment, which is the attempt to generalize based on specific case. This specific case is so unique in its aspects, in the aspects specific to the case, that you can generalize this to so many things, right? You can generalize this to a more sort of therapy-based model. Two participants in the home, both experiencing the same internal struggles of the house, the bills, the kids, the demands, gas prices, blah, 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 blah. One person contextualizes those external stressors and becomes very, very aggressive and irritated and wants to flee, right, or wants to fight. Another person in the exact same home, experiencing exactly the same stressors, has better coping mechanisms, and because of these more advanced, better coping mechanisms, isn't as affected by external stressors, right? So that it relates exactly to this, right? The stressors are exactly the same. However, two individuals interpret and react to these external stressors in two totally different ways. This is the point, right? This is a unique case in which we can generalize across so many fields, right? We can take this outside of epistemology and apply this. I mean, it becomes epistemological because we want to know how people's understanding of their life. So if you were to do a therapeutic model, how is it that the person who's performing, quote unquote, better than the other, or more efficiently than the other, given the same stressors, how is it that you do it, right? We need an epistemological understanding. We need epistemological access to the mechanisms in which the person processes that information, because they process it and they see it, quote unquote, in a different sense than I might or you might, right? So the idea is we look to, and this is critical, right? We look to the bodies, we look to the people who have demonstrated, right? That's the point of this, the importance of demonstration, right? We look to the people, we look to the bodies who have demonstrated an ability to perform, right? We look to those bodies, we look to those people, because those people, they don't become gods in the transcendent sense. They don't become gurus. They don't have to be, right? They don't have to be leaders of any sense. But what they do is they have a direct, if they do it well, and it's not just sort of arbitrary, if you systematize it, they have a recognition of how to, I won't say properly, but how to effectively and efficiently, for their contextual reality, interpret and interact with external stimulus. And if we have a context that is similar to them, then we should use their mechanisms to guide the way in which we live our lives, until we arrive at such point that, you know, we are masters of our own future, and now we create our own sort of interface, right? But, I mean, why reinvent the wheel? Somebody has a great interface. They do exactly what I do. I'm a professor, young, trying to figure out truths of reality. Let me look at people who are doing similar stuff that I'm doing, and let me sort of emulate their model. Oh, okay, I get how this is done. I want mine to be a little bit different. Now I contextualize it specific, make it my own. And now this becomes, in a sense, the template with which others generalize and make new, and on and on and on and on and on, right? Okay, so this is a key question then. How do we connect our thoughts to the world, right? How is it that we connect our thoughts to the world? It's partly by making this recognition. We need to recognize that when we're talking about the world, we have the world as aspects of the world that are mind independent. But there are aspects of the world that are mind dependent, right? The world as such is both mind dependent and independent, and there is no contradiction in that recognition, right? There is a sense in which, and people will disagree with this, and I could get into a more nuanced discussion, but this is an introductory account, so I don't want to really get nitty gritty. But the idea is, there's aspects of the red square, let's just keep it simple. There's aspects of the world Well,